Well, and welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Thursday, July 20th, 2023. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Got a lot to talk about today, the news, lots of rich information. But before I begin, two housekeeping things. One is I want to invite your support, to ask your support for growing our network, our channel, and our experience. What we want you to do is go over to YouTube Insight News MN, YouTube Insight News MN. Subscribe, like, and share. Tell everybody you know that we're doing this every day, and we want to grow the community that we are creating on the conversation with Al McFarlane. I want to acknowledge all of the platforms and streams that we are using to create this community. They include the YouTube Insight News MN channel, but they also include a wonderful partnership, hosting partnership with YouTube Black Press USA, the National Newspaper Publishers Association. We thank them for their support and their promotion of this show daily. We also are streaming live on the Facebook page of NNPA, Black Press USA, on the Insight News Facebook page, and on my Facebook page, Al McFarlane on Facebook. We're streaming live on Twitter and streaming live on LinkedIn, trying to reach you wherever we can. If you have suggestions or ideas or more ways to connect with you or connect with more people, let us know. By the way, we love it when you make comments, when you just say hello. You go to the comment section and tell us who you are and where you are. You got a comment on the topics or a suggestion for a topic, we want to hear that as well. Before we begin, we want to remind you that our friends over at the Minnesota Department of Health are hosting a COVID vaccine event on July 27th at the CAPI IOC on 5930 Brooklyn Boulevard in Brooklyn Center. The event takes place from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's free, open to the public, and the Department of Health encourages everyone to get vaccinated against COVID. Make sure you are protected. Well, with that, we got a lot to talk about today. Our topics include several, and I'll tell you who's going to be with me talking about them. But the things we're following are the story on Travis King, the U.S. soldier who crossed into North Korea. We'll talk about that. We also have been watching the news where information is about Sister Carlee Russell, a woman who went missing in Alabama after calling 911 about a child on the interstate. And the third topic is going to be student loan and affirmative action rulings. What advocates fear mean losses for racial equality. So those are three topics. We've also got an author on today, my friend Albert Briscoe, along with our books editor, talking about his work and about our promotion of reading of authors from our community. So W.D. Foster Graham, our books editor, will be with us later on in the program. Let me begin by bringing in my colleagues, Dr. Irma McClaurin and Yoji Senna. Dr. McClaurin, are you down south, Dr. McClaurin? Are you out east again?
I am still in Alabama. I'm a Bama roots girl.
All right. And of course, Yoji is joining us from Bahia in Brazil. Yoji, good to see you again.
Thank you. Good to see you too. Good to see Dr. Irma too.
Well, let me open up by this topic about Travis King. I got a story that is from NPR News, and it said what we know about Travis King, the U.S. soldier who crossed into North Korea. And this story was updated yesterday. It was written by Vanessa Romo, Ashley Westerman, and Emily Olson. It's a photograph of Travis King, a soldier believed to be in North Korean custody after he ran across the border on Tuesday. It's a Reuters photograph. And a couple of paragraphs. A U.S. soldier who crossed into North Korea on Tuesday did so willfully and without authorization, according to U.S. and international officials. He's now believed to be in custody of North Korean armed forces. The man, whom an Army spokesman identified as Travis King, was a private second class who'd been released recently from a detention center in South Korea. He was scheduled to be flown home to the U.S. when he somehow returned to South Korea, joined a tour group to the demilitarized zone, and ran across the heavily fortified border into North Korea. The story goes on to tell what happened. I'll summarize it in 2 sentences here. He was a cavalry scout. That's his job in the Army since 2021. He's 23 years old, been stationed in South Korea, but he'd served 2 months in prison there for an assault, according to the Associated Press. And the assault uh, was him punching a South Korean national in a club last September. He'd also been fined almost $4,000 for causing public damage and for being uncooperative with the police at the time of his arrest. Well, you know, uh, it's a good story. You read it. The interesting part is that when he was coming home or being shipped home for more charges, theoretically, he decided to take a U-turn, put on civilian clothes, walked with a tour group to the DMZ, and then he bolted across into the North Korea side. And that's where this story really takes off. And the question is, was he escaping military discipline? Well, Irma, what do you think about this? Have you read the story? What comes to mind as you think about what happened?
Well, I just we just had a military memorial service for my uncle who served in the Army and was a sergeant major, which is the highest enlisted man can get, which for a Black man born in 1939 was quite remarkable. And sort of what I've gathered from listening to him and probably watching too much NCIS is that there's more to this than meets the eye.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it begins with what would have been the cause of the altercation. What most people don't know is that Asian cultures, there is a strand of anti-Blackness there. I know someone who was in the military who had a child with Korean women and literally went and picked up his son and brought him back because the way that he was treated as a biracial, particularly part Black and Korean, was problematic. And he felt that this child was being mistreated. I'm not saying that that is pervasive, but I think that what caused the altercation, the fact that not only is he now going to be punished by the South Koreans, but he's now got to come back and face disciplinary action. And I think we know that the story of the military, even though a humongous amount of Black soldiers, both men and of recent women, have used the military as the sort of ladder to upward mobility. They can get GI Bills, they can get education, they can get technical skills, but it also comes with its own brand of white supremacy and what some people don't want us to talk about, oppression. And so I think there's more to this than meets the eye, and perhaps by going to North Korea, he's shining a spotlight that he can get the media attention to tell his side of the story. Because the military is notorious, just like the police department, for suppressing certain kinds of stories that they don't want broadcast.
Yoji, when you hear the story, what comes to your mind? You're watching it from a different lens, a different point of view. I don't know if you have a military background at all or not. You certainly have.
I've been in a military college.
You have, okay.
So Dr. Irma not only is watching NCIS, but seems that she watched those intelligence series too, because her analysis is perfect. He clearly is running from something that for him is very dangerous, and the decision to go the decision to go to North Korea, it is to call attention to maybe he have a better chance of tell his history, because just a bar fight first, I don't think that would accrue 2 months in detention, and then that he been shipped off back to the U.S. for further punishment. So the story is not proportional, and nothing that those factors that are presented. So I think there is bigger thing, and we're gonna know a little bit more about you know being a black man in the
That's
army.
right.
It's as difficult as being outside of the army, and in many cases they run away to the perceived enemy of the government of the United States, because at least for geopolitical reasons they're going to be treated well for a while, you know. So yeah, there's more to come in this story.
What's your military experience, Yoji?
The army.
You were in the army, in the U.S.
Yeah.
Army or in the
No,
Brazilian Army?
Brazil.
Okay, so as an ex-army person, you described a little bit what you think, but from the eyes of chain of command, how does this action appear, and what does chain of command require of the institution, the military institution, in order to maintain its decorum, control, and compliance of all of the members of the organization? What do you think?
Well, he's in mutiny clearly, you know. You know, it got to be something that he needs to say or to be protected, because even the jeopardy that he put himself in, further present himself in mutiny, that would add
Right.
more punishment. So I think this story, it is, we don't know much right now, but and because of the, it's a black man taking this action, so he's aware that his North Korea is not also a very welcoming place, but and for the description of what happened, he certainly was clever in plan to melt in with the tour
The tourists.
group. Yeah, and go back to the militarized zone, because also it has visibility there if he would be captured or something. So,
I mean,
you
this is
know,
not an impulsive person. And I think what
yeah,
Yoji pointed out is that this is someone who I think is intelligent enough to have thought, how do I get visibility or a light shine on what may be things that nobody's going to see? Because the military is notorious. We know, I'm an author for Ms. Magazine, and Ms. has done numerous stories on military and rape, and they are notorious for burying it for decades. So if there's racism, if here is someone who's intelligent enough to plan to escape to what is basically an enemy country, this person is not going to be easily provoked. So why was he arrested in South Korea? And how is it that the military didn't extricate him from it, that he stays in a South Korean jail and not, military confinement? And then now he's going to be subject to more military discipline when he returns home. He may think, North Korea prison may be better than U.S. military punishment. And that's quite a statement in terms of someone.
Well, the article goes on to say that the soldiers' detention poses a fresh diplomatic challenge for Washington's wary relationship with North Korea. The U.S. does not have a formal diplomatic relationship with Pyongyang. NPR's Greg Myrie said North Korean leader Kim Jong-un may endeavor to leverage the incident for political gain. He says it wouldn't be surprising if North Korea tries to score some propaganda points or makes demands in exchange for handing over the soldier. That's what he told All Things Considered. The article goes on to say that a lot of U.S. citizens have been detained by North Korea over the years. The last time was in 2018 when Bruce Byron Lawrence illegally entered the country from China. He was held in custody for a month before his release. Before that, Tony Kim, who was a Korean-American professor, and Kim Hak-song, a former South Korean politician, who also held U.S. citizenship, were both detained in 2017 and then released over a year later. And their release came on the same day that another American, Kim Dong-chul, who had been held since 2015, was released. All three were set free during a visit to North Korea by then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and ahead of the much anticipated summit between then President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un in Singapore later that year. So you never know. I mean,
I think there's a cautionary tale in here, which is that you do not go, one, you don't go illegally into countries that we have no diplomatic relationships with. That's like rule number one, but also, I think that as we travel, we have traveled as Americans, and I include Black Americans in this because we do travel with a level of privilege, but we also travel with a level of myopicness in that we think that we're the center of the universe and that we can come and go as we please. And so sometimes we venture into things that we really later realize that we really have no business doing. And I think that as Americans, as we travel, we have to be respectful that there are other sovereign governments, that our government is not the kingpin and it doesn't rule everything. And so we need to think about how we behave and act in other countries and with other cultures, because there are differences.
Let's pivot to the next story. Thank you, Dr. Irma. And the next story we mentioned is the one of Carlee Russell. There's an article on CNN by Emma Tucker, Steve Almasi, Nurin Saliha, and Jamail Lynch. It was a story that was updated this morning at about 7 o'clock. The headline says, police say they cannot verify most of the information Carlee Russell, who went missing in Alabama after a 9/11 call about a child on the interstate that she gave to detectives. And I'll kind of read a little and summarize that. It says, police, and I watched this press conference on TV last night. It was pretty interesting. Police shared new details Wednesday on the case of Carlee Nicole Russell, the Alabama woman who went missing for 49 hours last week after calling 911 to report a toddler walking along alone on the side of the highway, saying investigators have been unable to verify most of Russell's initial statement. So at a news conference, police chief of Hoover, Alabama, Chief Nick Durzis, said the investigation continues, but authorities do not believe that there's a threat to the community. And the community is just south of Birmingham. I've been there. It's a nice town, I think. Durzis told reporters that no one has reported a child missing, and investigators have found no evidence of one. And the chief said detectives spoke briefly to Russell once they want to interview her again. You're in Alabama, Irma. Tell us more about the story and how much in the community, how much the community is saying and feeling about what's going on.
Like I think I'm giving TMI, too much information about the shows I watch, but I feel like I'm now in CSI, right? And so there's several things that come to mind. First, I want to remind our viewers that there have been instances in which white women have actually kidnapped their children, murdered them, and then claimed some story, and it's usually a Black person who did it to them. And everyone has, takes every effort to believe this person. What the statistics say is that Black women who disappear at a much higher rate than white women don't get investigated. Usually the police chalk it up to they must have run away because their anti-Blackness has them already stereotyping Black women. And so all of these things suggest, and I also want to speak to the disappearance of Native American women. So what does the data tell us? As someone who studies domestic violence, and I do expert testimonies for women seeking asylum, so I'm familiar with the CEDAW, the Convention to Eliminate All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And so I've done this research. And what the research says that if Black women are abused or raped, they're less likely to be believed, whether the policeman is white or Black. If there are charges, then the perpetrator, whether they're Black or white, receive far lesser sentences than if the victim was a white woman, okay? Native American women disappear all the time and we never hear about it. And there is a whole part of Mexico, Suarez, where women have been disappearing for decades now, and we hear nothing. Whatever it is that compelled this woman, we don't know if her story is true just because people didn't see the child. If this was one of those things where they use the child to lure somebody, they might have just picked up the child and taken them away. So it's very plausible. It could also be an attention getter, someone who wants attention. We know that media attention, we have produced a culture of young people who believe that getting on TV is like next to being, it's like being a star. And so people do crazy things to get attention. But the point is that what it speaks to is that it's shining a light on the fact that there's always suspicion when the victim is a Black woman. There is less likely to be investigated with real authenticity. There's always some sense that we're somehow making this up. And that is a trend that has nothing to do with this case, but actually then shines a light on how cases get treated. Remember the young woman who was killed by her fiance and how we saw her picture all the time, the money that was raised. Black women disappear all the time, and we get not even an iota of light shined on it. So it's a problematic case. And I'm thinking of, was it Tawana Bromley, who was the young woman who claimed to have been assaulted, and then turned out that it was possibly not true. And so you have one person, and I think what happens is that if there's one transgression by a Black person, it casts doubts on all of us. But if a white person, a white woman, does something that's out of character or egregious, it doesn't cast dispersion on all white women. And that is the problem, I think, with this, that whatever the issue is that may have compelled this woman, we don't know if she made up the story. Just because they can't find proof doesn't mean it didn't happen. Okay. So I think we just have to wait and see how this unfolds.
Yoji, it sounds like, part of the issue here is the weight, the value of our existence in a social structure that has historically valued us only as property, as a means of production and for the benefit and wealth creation of white people, but that has contempt for us as partners in humanity. That's kind of what I'm feeling. What do you think? How do you read cases like this?
Yes. First, to me, kind of unusual at first, the publicity that was given, the notoriety. As Dr. Irma say, probably in that day, many other Black ladies has disappeared or during the same month. And then this outcome that is presaging to be, that in certain way it discredit us all, in the cases like is in the cases of those negative uh, actions possible for any of us that affect the others. So, but yeah, I would ask why that first get such an authority, you know, and if it happened that, sorry, also going with the analogy of entertainment, that she saw Chucky on the highway, that was also, it sound to me, was almost like somebody, I've seen that script in a movie. I don't remember what,
Yes,
but
it's called Chucky.
that somebody's, lured by a kid wandering in the highway. So,
I mean,
yeah.
it's plausible, and at the same time, it's possible that this is someone seeking to get attention, which happens all the time. I mean, we see actresses who do crazy things, and those things and nobody makes a big deal of it. What I think is going to happen, however, is this. This is the difference. If they find that this was a false report, they are going to throw the book at this young Black woman in ways that they would never do for white women. The ability to forgive white women for any kind of transgression, all they need to do is cry and apologize, and the world is at their mercy. But for Black women, they are going to want to put this woman under the jail, that the punishment or the kind of charges will not be, proportionate to whatever if it's found to be false. It's a false statement. Okay, so no big deal. No one got hurt. Yes, there was a lot of media publicity, but that happens all the time, right? But I believe that the police are going to use this. This will be another example of how we see how someone who makes a false accusation or charge, if they're white, is treated, or a white woman, and someone who is Black who does the same thing, and how the punishment is like 3 to 4 to 10 times fold. And I think that's what we need to observe, is what is happening and how she gets treated, right? Now, has anyone said the magic word, mental health or mental illness? Because when white people do this, they suddenly say, oh, this person has a history of mental illness, and so we should be more gentle with her. No one has brought this up, but I suspect that if in fact this is a false accusation, this person has some mental illness issues and should be treated more as a patient and someone who needs help, as opposed to a criminal. But right now, there's a suggestion that there's a kind of trend of moving it towards criminalization as opposed to mental health. So I think this is a mental health issue. I think we need to get more details. And if we find this was false, then what was happening in this young woman's life that would provoke her to want to make something like this up? Okay, that's a mental health issue. And again, we're willing to say that is the case with with whites and particularly white women, but we're reluctant to say that is the case when it comes to Blacks and particularly Black women.
So is there a connection between these two stories? The story
Well,
of
I was thinking,
Brother King
yes.
in South Korea and this woman in Hoover, Alabama. What do you think? I mean,
Well, I think, for me, it is the way in which, whatever the cause of the person becoming a victim, there is less empathy and sympathy. And I think you have said that yourself, Al, that when they are viewed through a white media lens, there is less likelihood to be empathy for them, whatever it is that caused them to do that. Let's go back to Brittany Grenier. It was only after people started doing outcries that suddenly the media was much more sort of empathetic, to her case. And still there are some challenges and issues about how she is perceived and how she's presented and how she's treated by the media. And so I think there are some connections here. And I think the underlying strand is the way in which anti-Blackness permeates so much of how the world sees us, how they treat us, how they believe us or don't believe us. I think it's just rampant.
it reminds me too, Dr. Irma and Yoji. When say there's a shooting in Minneapolis or somewhere, any town, you name it, a mass shooting, and if it's in a white school, not only is there both outrage and empathy, but a systemic response that says we have to deal with the trauma that all of the other students and the families and the communities are experiencing behind either a single shooting or a mass shooting. But Black communities, Black children, Black families are not afforded the same empathetic response. And it's like if gangsters kill a 8-year-old Black girl in North Minneapolis, in the middle of their duel or gunfight, it's just part of the neighborhood and nobody cares. Nobody rushes to the public podium saying, let us be concerned about all of the implications around mental health, not only for the child and her family, but for the entire community, all the classmates, all the schoolmates. And so there's a willingness to not value or view our lives, our experience, our emotions at the same time, an unlimited amount of support for white identity and white life. Does that feel the same way in Bahia, in South America, Yoji, or is it different?
It is similar from the systemic point of view, because here being And this is the case. My reality here in Bahia that is 90% of the population black.
Hmm.
So the police are black,
Mm,
and of course that the upper echelon of the police and the government, they are a little bit lighter skin, up to those shade of white people. But still, so people don't recognize that immediately and get masqueraded many times in social class. But the response, it is as, as brutal and sometimes even more brutal than in the US, So, for example, the other day I went downtown Salvador and Dr. M, we're gonna see this. We have here, for example, the police system here. We have each state has a state military police.
Hmm.
So it's a police that's organized in military style and they dress in military kind of clothing. And they have the cars, but they here like the regular police car, it's like those big SUVs, you know,
Hmm.
with the trunk part is a little cage that people are throwing there, but they carry submachines, So and then they are, and then also now they have the municipal guards that are people that supposedly a guard that's it's for policing and guard municipal properties. And that recently, that was a ruling from the Supreme Court that they don't have the power of police, meaning of detain people,
Hmm.
right? So they just can guard the municipal property. But these people go into like two, three convoys of motorcycles with also with machine guns. It's kind of almost like surrealistic, right? This
Hmm.
urban scene, but they go in the trunk and they carry guns. You don't see them with heavy weapons, but they are like just like and all full of looks like
Kind of like cowboys. It reminds me, as you're saying, kind of a
yeah.
Wild West posse of some sort, or
So the
like.
deaths by the police here, it's daily and sometimes is semi chassis where several people are killed at the same time, and in the several states. And of course, in the states of the South, where the racial demographic is different,
mhm.
there is less black people. The police is white in many cases too. The situation it's as the same. So the police here in Bahia, it's the states that has the one of the highest mortality rates in relationship to to the population. And in the São Paulo state has decreased with the use of body cameras now that is starting to become, even the supermarkets are using now body cameras because of the cases of violence in Brazil against black people accused of 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 theft,
Shoplifting or some,
shoplifting. Exactly.
yeah,
You know. So what's funny?
falsely accused.
Yeah, the Carrefour, the French chain that is like the biggest chain here, the employee is gonna have to carry also body cams. You
Mm.
know, because they for a while like was every week a scandal in different states of them, like
Mhm.
even people be apprehended and tortured,
Mhm.
like beaten.
Which while that sounds appalling, is not unfamiliar to us here. And
Mhm.
Irma, I remember when Dayton Hudson, now Target, right,
Right.
uh, had a practice of detaining people accused or thought to be shoplifting in a cage area in the
Wow.
basement of their store in downtown Minneapolis, right? And this was routine, and I think was routine across many of the department stores. This is not so far, not so long
Mm,
ago.
that's right. That's
and
right.
and what began to change that was when they happened to detain a university professor or university employee, and this person was connected enough with the so-called, progressive leadership in the community that took that felt affronted, by the treatment of their colleague. But we have always challenged, this kind of behavior by authority or by business.
Yes.
But when it was challenged by people that have been silent in the past, then it came to light, then changed things. So this is not new. Look,
I've had my own version of that when I was at the University of Florida. I'm walking around in a beat up Camry and some shorts, and a white medical student decided that she didn't like how I responded to her after she had cut in line in a car washing thing. And I was so angry, I just threw my drink on the ground and I left, right? I get a call from the police that says, this person who's a medical student at the University of Florida. I said, really? Well, I'm a professor at the University of Florida, and I think I should call my attorney. And don't you have better things to do? And don't you ever leave a voicemail on my voice thing from the police, because you could have terrified my child, right? And by the time I finished talking to him, I said, first of all, I feel like I'm being targeted now because the person took down my license. My drink didn't touch them. They were the aggressor. They were the one who said, if I said it nice enough, then maybe I'll move, right? And I said, they were the ones who were transgressing me. And now you're harassing me. You're calling me, really? And by the time I finished, he had basically said, I think this is done. But the person assumed that because of how I was dressed, right, that I was a nobody.
And mostly because
black,
they were white.
They were white and a medical student too, and I'm supposed to be impressed. And when he said that, I said, well, I'm actually a professor there at the University of Florida, and I'll just call my attorney and see if you don't have anything better to do than to chase down something where this person is actually harassing me now. Because the incident is past, I didn't do anything to them, and now they're harassing me. And so by the time I finished, so all of us had those stories, and it's unfortunate, disparate treatment. A colleague of mine who was in a major automobile accident had head trauma, and so the speech was slurred. They had her out in the hallway until a student called at the university, and they called and said, we think you have one of our professors. They assumed she was drugged. They assumed she was an alcoholic. They assumed all kinds of things because of her slurred speech, and she was a Black woman. That was it. Not taking into account that this woman had just been in a major automobile accident, and head trauma produces slurred speech. So these are the kinds of things. And in those instances, before they find out who you are, you can die. That the treatment you get can actually cause you severe damage. And that's what people need to understand.
Well, let's pivot from here. Thank you, Dr. Irma. Let's pivot to the last topic today. And we mentioned student loans. There's an article in Associated Press that says, in student loan and affirmative action rulings, advocates fear losses for racial equality. And I'll just read a paragraph or two. Article by Annie Ma and Aaron Morrison, published on June 14th. So it's a story's been around a while, and it's Dateline Washington. It says, as a Black student who was raised by a single mother, Makia Green believes she benefited from a program that gave preference to students of color from economically disadvantaged backgrounds when she was admitted over a decade ago to the University of Rochester. And as a borrower who still owes just over $20,000 on her undergraduate student loan, she's been counting on President Joe Biden's promised debt relief to wipe away nearly all of that debt. Now, the student loan cancellation program has been dismantled by the Supreme Court, and at that time struck down affirmative action in college admissions. And that story continues to unfold. But Irma, put that in context. What does it mean for our people and for students and for higher education in general?
I think that we are at a moment in American democracy where there is a deliberate enterprise, and intentionality to basically dismantle everything that has been done to correct the egregious harms that were done by enslaving our ancestors, right? So everything that has been, because affirmative action was just that, it was to take positive action against a transgression of which slavery was. We call it human trafficking today, and those people in those countries, we tell them that that's very bad to do. So people need to understand that enslavement was human trafficking, and that this is the only country that actually reproduced slaves as a commodity, as if they were a bale of cotton, as if they were an animal to be sold.
Mhm.
This is the only country that actually did that on a massive scale,
Mhm.
where the selling of slaves internally, not bringing them here to the country, to the Americas, but then the internal forced reproduction, where Black women and men were forcibly made to reproduce with each other to create more slaves. So that's the context. And affirmative action in the 1970s was an attempt structurally for the United States to basically make reparations. You know, it was a form of reparations, if you will. Let's call it what it was. The Bakke case basically dismantled that. And then institutions have been trying to find ways to figure out how do we sort of further try and address this, this issue. And I think what is happening now is that Trump was very deliberate. People forget that he signed an executive order making it illegal to talk about diversity or anything if you were in the federal government, an employee, or if you were, in fact, a contractor with the federal government. And so what we have now is, by any means necessary, an attempt by, I would say, white people in a very generic sense, but those who carry a white supremacist and anti-Black perspective, to do whatever they can to erase any semblance of one, honesty about what actually happened in American history, to eliminate anything that gives us a hand, because they say it's illegal to use race as a factor, but race has always been a factor. It's just that whiteness is not racialized. But we would not have had to have desegregation if race was not a factor, because desegregation meant that whites could no longer just be all white. So there's always been race as a factor, but it's been normalized to believe that that's normal, and so that's not racism, when in fact that's exactly what it is. So I see this as an attempt to dismantle it, and we just have to keep voting. We may see the rise of another civil rights movement where we have to take to the streets.
What's the latest in Florida?
Oh, wow. Well, what's happening in Florida is that the state of Florida has decided that it's going to decide what gets taught as Black history. And one of the things they want to do is a curriculum that first it was starting with this, they were against the AP, African American Advanced Placement Test. But here is some of the language that people need to hear. The new standards for middle schools include: one, you cannot say that anybody was oppressed or privileged, right? So they're going to rewrite history. Slavery is no longer about oppression. And the second thing is, listen to this, they want to teach students, quote, how slaves developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. In other words, they want to take the fact that we picked cotton,
That was
right?
your university.
Exactly. That was like just alternative education, right? And so they really,
our ancestors came to be slaves because they had the skills already.
Yes.
Each one were, brought
and see,
to work
people don't
on
want
the
to
place where they
acknowledge
had
that.
skills already.
We don't talk about Black technology, African technology transfer. Rice production was because of African technology. They even talk about like Black slaves had actually figured out how to do cotton stuff before the cotton gin, right? The grill work that we find, the iron work that we find,
Yep.
there were plantations that specifically asked for slaves from certain regions because of the technology, the agricultural technology, scientific technology that they carried. And so I think this is us saying what we're seeing is an attempt to rewrite and whitewash history. And I just say white folks have lost their minds.
And so to sum up, Yoji and Dr. Irma, what's the resistance move? What do we do? How do we maintain both our mission and our commitment to our freedom? And as we pursue that, the evolution of humanity
as
well.
We've always done, we resist, we resist, we resist. We have Capoeira, which is what Brazilians did in order to sort of counter, the things that they were told they couldn't do. Black people have always resisted, and we need to recognize that as a given. We need to write books. We need to support Black newspapers. We've never depended upon white people to tell our history. And it was great that we had Afro-American studies, and I think there will still be some programs for those institutions that have enough resources. Like my own institution just instituted a new Department of African and Black Diaspora Studies. They have money. Okay, but other places that are required, that are dependent upon state funds and stuff, may not be so lucky. Black organizations, professional organizations, the National Council of Black Studies, the National Women's Studies Association, the Association of Black Anthropologists, the Association of Black Economists and Black Sociologists and Black Archaeologists. These organizations are going to be very, very important in the future, because that may be the only space and place where we get to articulate what our real ideas are, because censorship is what they're doing.
Exactly.
Listen, I want to acknowledge Joe St. George, Esquire from Bowie, Maryland. Thank you for watching, and also acknowledge our friend and regular participant here, Michelle Madison, always with a voice, a comment, a word of praise. Thank you both. Dr. Irma, Yoji, thank you. This has been a great conversation. We're going to pivot now to our next part of the program and bring in W.D. Foster to talk about books. But you guys have a great, great day, and thank you so very much.
So much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We pivot now to the next part of the program with our books editor, book review editor, W.D. Foster Graham. Brother W.D. Foster Graham, how you doing? Welcome. Good to see you again.
Hi, Al. It's great to be here one more time.
There we go. Well, you got a book and an author to introduce. Go ahead.
Oh, that is correct, Al. I had the honor of meeting this author at the Minnesota Black Authors Expo event over at the Brooklyn Park Public Library here in Minnesota. He is a Minnesota certified peer recovery specialist. He works with such organizations as the Twin Cities Recovery Project, as well as Turning Point. He has been labeled as a crime prevention specialist because he helps to break the chains of addiction of criminal thinking and behavior. He's trained in MRT. He is a prison reform advocate, and he is the author of the book, Finding Your Purpose. So it is a great honor to introduce to Conversations Al McFarlane, Brother Albert A.J. Briscoe.
Brother Briscoe, how you doing, man?
Oh, I'm absolutely amazing, Mr. McFarlane.
Good to see you again. Tell us about your book.
Well, Finding Your Purpose is our latest release book. It's a read geared towards helping individuals pull what's inside of them and place it in front of them. Put the best of what's inside of them and place it in front of them. It's a tool that individuals can use to help rehabilitate their life. They can also use it as a tool to motivate their greatness, inspire their greatness, and also identify key moments in your life that are meant to propel you to find your purpose in life.
Take a minute and talk about your own personal story, Brother AJ. What led you to writing Finding Our Purpose?
I had a personal struggle. I'm a native of North Minneapolis, and I grew up in an era where gang banging, selling drugs. I grew up. It was at a peak at that time, and that was what was impressionable on me. And I made some bad decisions in my life, and I had to come to a point, like a fork in a road, and decide which way I was going to go. So when I discovered that my lifestyle that I was living, I was conditioned into, wasn't that significant in regard to what my purpose was. After I discovered my true purpose, I had to write about it.
And so the message that you leave readers with is what?
I kind of don't. I kind of, it's kind of like a hidden jewel in the book, but I'm going to share it in a sense. And ultimately, the message, the significance of the message of the book is to never give up.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds good, Al. And when I was reading it, I'm reminded of the quote, "Without a test, there is no testimony." Could you share with us some of the steps in your book towards finding your purpose?
One of them, and I think this may be one of the most overlooked things that happens to the most common individual, for every individual, is when things happen in your life that you might not pay that much attention to, or your interest might not lie in that time. They seem to be a preparational tool for what God's purpose is, what your true purpose is in life. When you reach that moment where it's probably needed the most.
Okay. And what is the, say, importance of perception?
Well, perception is kind of, it's a thing to where it, I don't think you can allow it to be biased. You can have your life, your the moments in your life can have an influence on the perception you may have. I'm also an author of another book called Lynch and Willie, and it speaks on the Willie Lynch syndrome, and one of the things that I speak about, and it's related to finding your purpose, is that some things are taught in house and they're ingrained into our mind, from our elders, from our parents, from the people that that are in our environment, and that's something that can shape your perception. So if you don't get out on your own and use your own experiences, use your mind, use your interaction with people to perceive, to gain your own perception, then you could be deceived. So perception is something that we really have to give close attention to, so that we might not be labeled as a racist, or we might not be making the wrong decisions, because you can have your perception on life, like dealing with what I do as a CPRS. Some people think that their criminal behavior or their criminal thinking is normal. So that perception may lead them down the wrong path, or may lead them having to deal with a circumstance in a form of getting into something easily, but which is hard to get out of, like prison.
Let me ask you what to describe what you observe in people as criminal behavior or criminal thinking or defective thinking. I think everybody has their own idea of what that is, but you studied it and you're working, trying to help people come out of the kind of thought processes that end up creating a negative experience for themselves and people around them and community. Describe that, though. What is it? Give me several examples of what you would call, broken or defective or criminal behavior. What do you think?
I'm a kind of categorize it, like place it under umbrella. One, gang banging, which is, which brings on crime, black on black crime. It brings on inner city insolence, and it brings on a mind state to where our youth, our young people, even some of our older, our elders in the community, they believe that that's okay. That's the way of life. That's gonna be the way of life. There is no other way of life.
Okay,
And
so go into that for a minute. Let's break that down, if you don't mind, brother. Yeah, if a person doesn't know what gang banging is, what is gang banging? What is it? How do you define it? What is it?
it's I guess to give a person who is totally foreign to the concept, the ideal of what it means, it's a form of racism in the sense of because with gangbanging, was the common thing people think about is colors red and blue, a Crippin' Blood or a 5 or 6, a GDL or Vice Lord. So if you are from, let's say the Blood Gang, when you see somebody that's from the other side of what they call an op nowadays, the youth, somebody from the blue side, then you automatically have what we go back to what we just spoke on, a certain perception about them.
Mm-hmm. So
as if they're your opposition. There's someone that is that are totally different from you.
Okay. Okay. So keep going. What other kinds of examples do you give of people that fall into? And so let me ask you, why is that experience something that you're describing as a condition of, or reflection of, or a place that holds criminal behavior? So let me do some weighing here. On the one hand, I hear you describing people that found common purpose, common analysis, common point of view, but the negative side of that finding community is that it requires that you put yourself in opposition to anybody that's not in your stream of thought, in your perspective, and that's a negative. So is there good there at all? Is there potential for good, or does the situation always result in creating a conflict between groups that we don't have to have? What do you think?
Well, there is some good that can come out of the bad situation. It mainly depends on the mind state of the individual. And based on the mind state of the individual, they could be effective, or they could use their influence in the wrong way. They can use it the right way or the wrong way. Because this is one thing with those type of group settings is this, that um, they really don't allow anyone outsider to pierce their circle. So like it has to be somebody working from the inside. It can't be nobody working from the outside. Then it has to be someone working from the inside to try to get them out of the circumstance or the condition that they're in.
Okay.
Okay, and as we close,
Go ahead.
Where can we get your book? Readers want to know.
You can simply go on Amazon, look my name up, Albert Briscoe, or Finding Your Purpose. You can visit my website at www.stompentertainment.com, spelled out STOMP, entertainment.com. You can catch me at a community event, tabling at community events. Recently, you can look out for the bibliophile bus. I just had a bus customized, and I'm using it as a platform for Black authors and local authors, so that they'll be able to use it as a platform, so they'll be able to extend their works in our community. It's called the bibliophile bus.
We got to wrap it up right there, out of time. Listen, brother, Good to see you again, and continue.
Definitely.
All right, man. I'm
All
Al
right.
McFarlane. Thank you, Brother W.D. Foster Graham, and join us again tomorrow. The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you.